Hello, everyone. My name is John Euler, and this is normally Journey to Healing. We have a special program tonight, and I may be making a plug for our special guest if he can't join us because of technical difficulties. But I want to take this opportunity, and this will fit into Journey to Healing, but we're going to look at what is going on with what's called the trans movement, the trans deception, and how children and, quite frankly, how women are being placed in harm's way. And for a number of states, this Tuesday is going to be a deciding factor as far as who gets in office and who is going to influence legislation. And I want to speak in general to states to voters across the US, but especially to voters in Virginia, in the 11th district, the Senate district of Virginia, because you have the opportunity, and it's going to be an uphill battle, and it's going to take everyone joining together to ensure that this candidate Philip Hamilton, is voted into the Virginia State Senate. Actually, there needs to be a red wave in Virginia. Why? Because as goes California, so goes the rest of the nation. And we are going to look at what happens when the Biden Kamala Harris agenda pushing the trans deception takes over. And we will show you why it's so important to make sure you and anyone that you know that is above the voting age, that has a voter ID, goes out and votes. And especially, we're going to be talking to the voters in Virginia and those in the 11th district as we look at and we introduce a special edition to you of what is called Unmasking the Trans Movement.
Hi, and welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, I was going head-to-head with Virginia state law, trying to implement affecting changes in regards to gender ideology. We'll be back with more right here on Unmasking the Trans Movement after these.
Join Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler as he hosts Unmasking the Trans Movement's next webinar, where we connect you with the clinical professionals who provide understanding on the many topics that make up this disturbing ideology and answer any questions you may have. Protecting the most vulnerable, women and children. Unmasking the Trans Movement. For more info on guests, dates, times, and pricing, see us online at unmaskingthetransmovement.com.
Welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm Brad Wilder. Today on the show, taking up, the issue of gender ideology within schools, within libraries, within, just your everyday normal lifestyle. It's everywhere. Obviously, we know that. They're trying to force it on people. The laws are changing. We're going to delve into that today as well. We've seen some stuff happen in Washington State yesterday. We've seen some stuff that's going on in other parts of the United States, like Florida. There's a lot happening, and today we're going to bust it all open and get right into it. So with that, let's bring in our wonderful expert, John Euler. John, great to have you back on the show, pal. Thank you very much for being here today. Where do we begin? I mean, the laws, they're crazy right now. The Democratic Party, possibly a little crazier than even the laws that they're implementing. The radicalness of this all is transpired into a real push to bring this ideology into the mainstream. And I tell you what, I think that people are starting to get their backs up, much like our guest today, and saying no, putting their foot down and, trying to take control back of their own lives, back of their own futures, and back of their own country, which is, God bless America.
Thank you, Brad. And thank you for being a part of our program right now. And we're trying to, right now, we have some tech issues. See, I need you in the studio, Brad. You always do such a nice job. Folks, that is Brad Wilder. He is our producer for the program Unmasking the Trans Movement. We are here tonight to do a special introduction for the voters in Virginia, but this is going to be applicable to voters everywhere. This election cycle, so this election, especially on Tuesday, is going to make or break a lot of things, including the protection of women and children. We have so much on the line, and we are having challenges here in studio. You'll have to bear with me because I think we have on the phone with us Philip Hamilton, who's running for the Virginia Senate seat, the state of Virginia. He is in the 11th district. Let me see if I can get him on the line. Philip, are you there? Philip, first of all, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule. This is coming down to the wire for you and the other candidates.
Nelson County, part of Louisa that John McGuire is not running in, and Amherst County. And we're working heavy, especially in Amherst County, because there were precincts that went over 80% Republican as recently as last year. And if we can get Amherst County turnout big, we can overcome all those liberal votes in Charlottesville City and win the Senate seat. So I'm feeling optimistic. We're putting a lot of hard work in. I got 3 more days of door knocking ahead of me before the polls open on election day. So we're ready to win this.
Well, again, thank you for taking your time out. And I want to encourage those, as I'm, Philip, you would know, I'm staring at the camera. I'm staring at those out in our audience. I want to encourage all good people, first of all, to get out and vote, but also those that are connected to churches. We're talking to pastors right now. We are talking to those that have connections within faith-based communities, within Christian communities. It is so important, regardless of what state, but certainly in Virginia, because we're featuring Philip Hamilton, who is running for the Senate seat, state Senate seat in the great state of Virginia in the 11th district. He has an uphill battle. That is pretty much a blue district. And so, Philip, you have an uphill battle, but we're going to trust that God is going to perform a miracle. Why? Because there is so much on the line. Philip, you are a conservative. Many programs on TECN.TV deal with the multiplicity of conservative issues, but on my program, we're focusing on those things that can either help or hurt people. And therefore, in focusing on those issues that can be crucial when it comes to mental health, well-being, and therefore the great nemesis, in my estimation, the great concern out there socially is the trans movement. I call it the trans deception, because children are being harmed. And you have spoken out about that. Speak to our listeners about your concerns, and then that feeds right into what's going on in the classrooms. You were recently interviewed as far as your perspective, what you will do to help keep predators out of schools, to keep these deviant books out of schools. So speak to the viewers, the listeners now. Where do you stand in terms of the medicalization of kids, and then what's going on in schools and other things?
And I was actually chased by 10 militant transgender activists last month. They were heckling me and one of my supporters with the Jefferson Council just because we went to Abigail Schreier event, and she talked about how the transgender movement is affecting our daughters in America. And they hate that I'm a vocal voice in the Charlottesville area. They think words are violence, and anything that counters their message is so terrible. But those folks, they don't believe in the science. They're ignoring how this medical transgenderism is adversely affecting our children. It's causing osteoporosis. It's causing severe medical issues. Sterilization. And even psychological, mental issues, you name it. There's all sorts of things going on. Like Lupron increases the rate of suicide and increases the amount of suicidal thoughts that teenagers have. And it's all out there. But unfortunately, there's some in the medical profession that choose to ignore these facts, put forth this radical LGBTQ plus agenda. And they try to shield it by saying trans rights are human rights. So, we're going to just deny all the negative stuff and say this is a human right, and it goes down to even 12-year-olds who want to transition to another gender. And I think that's utter nonsense.
Philip, I want to interrupt right now. I want to make sure people are understanding what you are talking about, what we're talking about when it comes to transgender medicine. So I want to play a clip of an interview I did with Alex Aaron of the Gender Mapping Project, an interview entitled The Dark Reality Behind Transgender Medicine, an interview with Alex Aaron. Let's play that for a moment. People will then begin to understand what you are talking about, what we're talking about when it comes to transgender medicine or gender-affirming care.
I'm really trying not to be revolting here.
Go ahead and be revolting. We need to hear it. We need to hear it.
Right.
Listen, if somebody shies away from this, they don't care about kids. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Right? If somebody has to hide the nature of the procedure, such as, isn't it interesting? That's what cults do. Cults change the language. We have to let people understand so they get viscerally engaged. So these Nazi-like profiteers, these doctors that are removing body parts from kids that have mental health issues, 100% of them have mental health issues that are never treated. Why? Because these doctors are in it for cash. So they don't call a double mastectomy anymore. We've rebranded it as top surgery. And so now we have these woke parents and others that are using these terms they don't even know, and they're fast-tracking these kids toward this kind of stuff. So you know what? Let's put it out there. People need to know.
That means that they will remove the chest, they will remove the breasts, but they will not reattach the nipples. Okay, so in terms of the nullification, let me just read out to you what they promise. If anybody's triggered, by the way, by any of this, please click away now because it's only going to get worse. So nullification creates a relatively continuous and mostly unbroken transition from the abdomen down to the genital area, enabling gender non-conforming patients to enjoy a body that looks closer on the outside to the way they feel on the inside. And what this procedure is promising to do, so it does a variety of different things. So I'm really trying not to be revolting here. So if you are let's say if you are a boy, a man, boy that wants to be a girl, they don't want to be girls, they want to be non-binary. So what they've done is for one of the procedures is that they remove the penis, the balls, the testicles, the scrotum, and they essentially sew everything up together. So you really, I'm talking like a Ken doll, that type of a thing. When I look at the pictures, it's actually not clear to me how this patient is able to urinate. I've no idea. Some of the other procedures that they perform is you can see that the vagina itself is preserved, but they have kind of almost stuck on a neophallus on top of that.
In other words, a fake penis. They create a fake penis.
Because Planned Parenthood is forced to release every 2 years. They do this kind of they do this trans survey, and it's a really massive survey. It's like 25,000 teens. So it's 25,000 teens. And from their last from their last actual survey that they did, a shocking 91% were female, or as they said, assigned female at birth. So they're totally aware of what's going on. And they've been aware of it for at least 4 years.
I wanted to find ways of dealing with my gender issues that aren't medically transitioning, and those ways weren't presented to me. The only solution that was presented was chopping your breasts off injecting yourself with hormones and becoming a man.
A lot of what drove me to transition in the first place was linked to a lot of mental health issues and a lot of stuff that I had going on.
Nobody in the medical or psychological field ever tried to dissuade me to offer other options.
The fact that I was so obsessed, this should have been some sort of red flag to someone somewhere.
There were all these red flags, and I honestly wish that somebody had pointed them out to me, and then I might not have transitioned in the first place.
How many of you feel that you were blindly affirmed?
I didn't get enough pushback on transitioning. I went for 2 appointments, and after the second one, I had my letter to go get on cross-sex hormones.
2 visits? That's it?
And the therapist that I found only required 1 therapy session in order for her to be comfortable writing this letter for me.
The therapist that I got, she actually told me that she could get me all the paperwork that I needed to transition that after my first session.
But I mean, of course, hindsight, because back when I wanted to take hormones, I thought Planned Parenthood, oh my God, this is like a godsend. I don't have to go, because I didn't want to talk to a therapist. So I don't have to jump through any hoops. I don't have to do anything. I just walked in and got it.
There's even moderate Democrats in my district who don't believe in this radical transgender, and I am gaining support with independents, moderate Democrats, as well as Republicans. My Twitter page, I actually posted a video that one of my whistleblowers sent out to me, and she was scheduling at a Virginia hospital. And, there's some of my voters, who counter me and say, oh, well, this isn't happening. The kids under the age of 18, they're not having their penises cut off. They're not having their testicles removed. They're not having their breasts removed. But it's happening in Virginia. And, Planned Parenthood, 5 minutes from where I live, gives puberty blockers and cross-hormone therapies. And they'll even do it on the first appointment. The lady at the vapor shop across the street from where I live, she told me one of her customers got puberty blockers on the first appointment at Planned Parenthood. It's happening. And you can deny it all you want, but the reality is there. And my whistleblower sent me another video of her calling at the Virginia Commonwealth University Children's Hospital, and she was scheduling an appointment to have her, it was a fake 13-year-old boy, but to have his testicles removed. And just another instance that the hospital said, well, we send it to the urology department, and we'll go ahead and have that procedure done once you have letter of approval from oncology.
Thank you for calling Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU. For English, press 1. If you're a physician or a physician's office, press 1. For Children's Pavilion, press 2. To schedule, reschedule, or cancel an appointment, press 4. For all other specialties, press 3. To return to the main menu,
Thank you for calling the Children's Patient Appointment Center of Richmond. This is, how may I help you?
Hi, I was trying to get connected with the gender clinic. I don't know if this is the right extension for that.
It is. Just 1 moment.
Okay.
May I have the patient's date of birth?
It is September 18th, 2010.
And what is the reason that he needs to be seen? Or she needs to be seen?
Well, we're interested in orchiectomy. I don't know if that's possible. She's been on blockers, and we're thinking about the next step now. And she would really want an orchiectomy.
Okay, spell that for me.
O-R.
Okay, may I place you on hold just a moment while I look into scheduling?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for holding, Mom. So for this diagnosis, I have to send a message over to the clinic, and they will reach out to you to schedule within 24 to 48 hours.
Okay, so they'll call me?
Okay, and the number that you gave, is that the best number to contact you?
Yeah, the 75.
That's right. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring up again where people can go and see that. That is on your Twitter site for those that have it. It may be on your Facebook as well. But I saw that. We actually have a mutual contact who was the woman that dialed that up just so I can reemphasize so people can take in what you just said. She posed as being a mother, a concerned woke mother. So this woke mother calls the children's hospital, the university hospital, and is looking to, she actually describes it, she wants to get the testicles removed from her 13-year-old in accordance with the transgender medicine push. And they actually were going to begin to facilitate that process.
Well, I'm proposing, once I'm elected, one of the first bills that I'm going to put in is not just civil offenses for doctors who mutilate the genitals of our children. Because some doctors are rich, they'll pay the fines, or they'll get these third-party groups to pay the fines for them, and then they'll be out. I don't think that's enough. We need to have criminal penalties for these doctors, for the nurses, and even for the schedulers. If you're scheduling children for these procedures, you're culpable in the crime. And we got to shut this down and say, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're saying no to puberty blockers, cross hormone therapies, and gender reassignment surgeries to children under the age of 18. We're going to bring our state to common sense. And if you're 18, you can do as you wish, but if you're not an adult, you are just not young enough. I mean, you're not old enough to comprehend what's happening. And unfortunately, there are some parents that push their kids into this, and it may not even be what the child wants, but the parent pressures them to do this because of their social justice agenda, or for whatever reason. So we got to protect the kids, even from certain parents who push them into this.
And Philip, what I'm going to do on the screen, you can't see this necessarily, but for those that are not familiar with, I don't know where they've been if they're not familiar with this, but the trans movement doesn't exist without the end of that moving sidewalk, which is dumping these kids out on a surgeon's gurney. It's the greatest scam, scheme, and ruse that's ever been foisted upon a vulnerable population. These are very troubled kids, and so most people now are familiar with the term transgender medicine or gender affirming care. And I'm going to bring up on screen now so that people can see what you are going to. You're going to pass legislation. You're going to introduce legislation to make it illegal to do this to kids. I've just brought up that is what's called top surgery. That is a double mastectomy. This is transgender medicine. This is affirmative care, and this is diabolical. So on the screen, I have a post-op. It looks like it just happened recently on the picture on the screen there, Philip, of a young kid. Wonder what the age of this young girl was who went through a double mastectomy. She is not in her right mind, meaning she's emotionally, mentally troubled, and somebody made a lot of money off of her.
Free. And it's like, what?
That's right. We're going to pay you to take it virtually. We're going to incentivize you. You get gift cards to Target and other things. Yeah. That's right. What's up with that?
Yeah. Trust this experiment. And the thing is, we need strong-willed people to stand up and say no to big pharma. And they have a hand in this. They want to push this medical transgenderism so that way they can profit off of the cross hormones, of course, giving estrogen, giving out testosterone, and in the surgery. So they absolutely have a hand in this.
And to help people understand, again, what we're talking about, I'll bring a little bit of my background just to really add emphasis to what you're saying. Is without my field, unfortunately, without what's called the DSM-4, and I've just brought up on screen, Philip, what we're looking at, what the audience is looking at, is the history of the most recent revision and publishing of what's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. There's the 5th edition. And you notice what Dr. Michelle Cretella called a J curve. So, wherever you go around the Western world, when you look at rates of referrals to transgender clinics, you pretty much have a flat line until about 2008, 2009. There was a little bump. That's when RuPaul Drag Race, the deviant guy that's dressing as a woman, that's when he launched his show. Is now in the 16th season or something. But then it started to die down. But then in 2013, and this is true around the world, you suddenly have a tidal wave spike shooting straight upward. And that is when providers could begin to make money. They could begin to bill for these services. And it was the DSM 5 that made that possible. So there is monetary incentive to begin to slice and dice these kids. There's no other way to put it.
She spoke 3 months ago in Amherst County, but she talked from a doctor's perspective a lot of the medical effects, osteoporosis and many other things that occur with kids. And she just wants to explain the facts. And there are still a lot of folks who do not understand all of this. They can't comprehend why society's bending in this direction, because this is a very different world from what people lived in even 10 years ago. Things have changed so much. And, I'm 36 years old, but gosh, 10 years ago, if you asked me about this, I'd be like, what are you talking about? How is this becoming mainstream? Would have never envisioned in 2013 that things would be widespread as medical transgenderism. But here we are, and we got to fight back. And if we don't, we're going to get run over, plain and simple. And I simply will not stand and allow that to happen in the 11th Senate District, Commonwealth of Virginia.
There we go. So, Phil, again, we're talking nationwide, but specifically, though, for your campaign, there are a number of states that this Tuesday, there's a lot riding on ensuring people get out to vote. And I want to encourage people to take other people with them and make sure that they have IDs. So we're not encouraging this Democrat playbook, vote early, vote often kind of thing. Right. So get to the polls, because there's so much riding on the line in each state. But the one thing that is now throughout the U.S. is this push to medicalize kids. And Philip Hamilton, you are running for the Senate seat in the great state of Virginia in the 11th district. So for those of you pastors, those of you that know anyone in Virginia, especially in the 11th district, in the Senate district, please encourage people to vote for Philip Hamilton. He upholds not just traditional values, but the safety of women and children. We're going to speak to a number of the specific issues. Philip, I'm going to begin to kind of throw you some softballs, not to make it easy on you, but we're going to talk about different topics that people may not be aware of, how these all are eventually tied into the trans movement, those that are pushing this. But on the screen, I'm going to bring up, and I will read them to you because we're at a disadvantage. You can't see this unless you're watching online. But I've just put up a graphic that comes from the very first video I did on understanding the trans movement, and I wanted people to see what are the dark special interests, because if people believe this is just about kids that are curious about sexuality or are gender confused, and they think that it is an organic thing, meaning rising up within them, then they're going to miss the big picture, which is this is the greatest man-made scheme that's ever come down the pike. So I'll just list for you, Philip. You're talking to me by phone, so this will be good. I'm going to go clockwise through this chart, and the audience can watch with me, and you listen along, and then I'll let you, Philip, comment on whatever you want to comment on, what you hear. But here are some of what I consider to be the dark special interests that, unless good men get elected like Philip Hamilton to the state houses, and again, he is running for the Senate seat in the 11th district in the great state of Virginia. Okay, but here is why we need strong individuals, strong legislators who will pass strong legislation in protection of women and children. So we're going to start listing off some of the dark special interests that have a vested interest in slicing and dicing off the body parts and sterilizing these kids. So we have at the top Big Pharma. We have big medical doctors and hospitals. We just addressed that. We have plastic surgeons. So you can see how all those go together, the doctors and the hospitals. We have transgender medical clinics and services. Then we have SOGI Sex Ed. As a matter of fact, I'll stop right there and let's talk about that, right? That stands for sexual orientation and gender identity. That's all the deviant sex ed books that are being pumped into schools. And Planned Parenthood is in there like a dirty shirt. You just referenced that. So, Philip, talk to us about, we'll just stop right there for a moment. Talk to us about what are your thoughts about everything from the school boards that are usurping parental authority, but then allowing the deviants, either deviant individuals, deviant men in women's underwear and cross-dressing. So whether the drag queens coming in or they're pumping in these books that are introducing the most deviant of sexual thoughts, that if those drawings were pictures, the adults, the teachers, would be arrested for disseminating pornography to kids.
When value, we should not be using our taxpayer dollars to purchase them for our children. I've looked at some of them like Genderqueer, Let's Talk About It, and other books, and they are shocking. I mean, the details of them. And I think they belong in porn shows. I mean, in Let's Talk About It, they show how they use a butt plug. And, to me, it's just shocking seeing, but they show, oral sex, and, other forms of intercourse. And they even talk in that book that you can change your gender. And it goes into transgenderism as well. And it's part of normalizing an indoctrination of our kids. And that's why they're so fixated on keeping these books in the schools. And actually the little free libraries that you see in many places. In Charlottesville, people have been putting these gender fluid LGBTQ plus books in the little free libraries so that kids can look at them over there. So they're trying to put it out everywhere. But we can't remove books from private places, Barnes and Nobles, little free libraries in our place like that. But in our schools where taxpayer dollars are being used, we can certainly put a stop to that. And also these drag queen story hours, those are wildly inappropriate for our children. We should not be having those in public libraries and public schools for our kids. And that's something I'm going to look into in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Because you don't see drag queen story hours for seniors. Well, there's no money in it because the seniors aren't going to go through the gender reassignment surgeries in puberty blockers and cross hormone therapies. It's the kids that are going to do it, and that's why they go after the kids.
That's right. I'm bringing back up the chart of what I call the dark special interests. I want to talk about Planned Parenthood for a moment. You already referenced that. They are a major player now in the transgender medicine end of things. So what I say, they're turning girls into boys and boys into girls, and they've left women far behind. And those same deviant men, and isn't this interesting, those who were able to Planned Parenthood and the supporters, those that really on the federal level that channel so much money into Planned Parenthood. We saw these marches with the pink hats, Million Woman March, and they were talking about an existential threat. They were referencing abortion. But if ever there's been an existential threat, the trans movement, the pushers of the trans deception, is an existential threat because Planned Parenthood is pushing the trans movement, yet they are supporting sexually deviant men going into women's sports, into women's and girls' private spaces, meaning bathrooms, locker rooms, showers, like we spa out in California. And I knew that was a deviant sex offender if he had been busted. And sure enough, it turns out that was an actual sex offender that was claiming he was a woman, because people don't think that any self-respecting sex offender wouldn't stoop so low, yes, they would, as to push their way into a female locker room or shower or bathroom to be able to gain direct access to women and kids. So speak to the issue of Planned Parenthood's push and support of these sexually deviant men, and then the dangers these men pose to women's sports, the safety of women and kids in these private spaces. So I know I've thrown a number of things out to you. So what comes to mind, especially with girls and women's sports, because these deviant guys want in the locker rooms, and that's why they're doing this, quite frankly. But they're destroying women's sports.
Women's for female re-education counseling. He refused it out now. He said, you'll have a team of one. Women are going to leave, and you'll have a man on the women's team, and and they banded together, and that man, he dropped out. And it shows when we band together, we can force change. And that is an example of things going in the right direction. Of course, with Riley Gaines, and Leah Thomas, unfortunately, Leah Thomas was allowed to compete and really, stole the title that, Riley Gaines and others should have had. And Leah, he would have been, what was it? If he was in the men's, he would have been 400 something, 476th place. But in the women's, he was first place. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. And and Leah Thomas was showing his genitals to the women in the locker room. I know Riley Gaines complained about that, and it really creates an unsafe space for a woman in an area where they should be able to dress. And I've met women who've been in locker rooms, and there was men who identify as women who go in there, and they have to go. They leave, and sometimes they're with their kids in the locker room, and they don't feel safe. Because these folks are allowed, and we're supposed to be female spaces. And of course, in Loudoun County, you see that there was this trans boy that was allowed in the girls' bathrooms, and he didn't just sexually assault one girl; he assaulted two girls. And the Loudoun County schools covered it up because they didn't want that going out to the public. And the father, one of the assaulted girls, was arrested for speaking out the school board meeting when the school board members were trying to cover it up. And thankfully, that father was pardoned. And there was a jury trial for this former superintendent who was part of the cover-up under Jason Miera. So things we're straightening things out in Virginia. Things are pushing back in the right direction, but we still got a lot more work to do. There are men in female spaces, in other female spaces. I know in women's prisons, the policy under Northam is that if you go through the gender reassignment surgery, you can be in a woman's prison. So there are men who've gone through the surgery who've been allowed in women's prisons, and I think that's a problem, because even if you go through the surgery, your chromosomes are not have not changed, and they probably are sexual predators and they'll go after these women in the prisons, and it's a violation of their Eighth Amendment right against a cruel and unusual punishment. And when the government allows this, they are violating the Eighth Amendment of the women who are currently in prison.
I'm going to trust that the viewers and those that are listening are saying amen, because you're certainly speaking my language as far as the safety of women and children. Not many people have thought about women that end up in prison. Some people are saying, well, if they get in there, they deserve it. But there's a huge difference between, because I used to work in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections on psych staff for 11 years, and I can tell people that there's a big difference between the crimes that are represented in male prisons versus in female prisons. And the vast majority of the women in female prisons are in there for the softer crimes. They're usually used by men, so they were driving the vehicle while he was doing the drug deal. And so they are damaged, oftentimes emotionally and psychologically damaged, because the vast majority of them have been sexually abused. So you take these women who've been traumatized in their lives. Now they've gotten into drugs and alcohol. They oftentimes are with the wrong kind of men, and they get caught up and end up doing time in prison. Well, very few of them are doing life, and therefore they're going to come back out. A lot of them have kids. And can you imagine then, and you nailed it, Philip, that these deviant men, deviance is not connected to hormones. So these guys can go through the surgery and it doesn't matter. They represent a clear and present danger to these women. And can you imagine being a woman? The cell door goes open, in walks this 6-foot tall, very large man who's supposedly dressed as a woman, and the door shuts behind them, the metal door, and she's in there with him. What do you think is going to happen to her? And I can guarantee what's going to happen. So this is such a travesty. And I know Kelly J. Keene has been talking about it. She has been doing rallies called Let Women Speak. I couldn't be more supportive of that. But who's the one? Who are the groups of men that always disrupt them? These are these pro-trans and the deviant men that are disrupting these women and assaulting these women. And they actually are connected oftentimes with Antifa. So you'll see Antifa out there protecting the drag queen story hour people from normal parents saying, you know what, only guys that have real strong inclinations, or they look like pedophiles, meaning they, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. And as you said, they're not out there reading to the elderly. Why are these deviant guys who have been looking at porn the night before, why are they trying to access kids? So females in women's prisons are absolutely put at risk. And so you have the women's sports, women in prison. How about, and I know I'm kind of jumping all over, I want to make sure we give you a chance to cover this. And for those that are just tuning in, we're talking to Philip Hamilton. He is in Virginia. He is running for the 11th district Senate seat. There's a razor thin margin between the Democrats, who want to continue to push the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris pro-pedophile agenda, and parents had better get involved and therefore go to the polls around the country, but especially for those of you in the 11th district. So, Philip, let me ask you another question as far as for those that are wanting to push the age of consent. They're going to do an end run on the age of consent. It's happening in California right now, where it is legal for a 24-year-old, and they're all perps, the men, but a 24-year-old can, how they put it, can quote unquote have sex with a 15-year-old. Now think about the age of a 15-year-old, what grade in school that is versus a 24-year-old. As goes California, so goes the rest of the nation. Talk to us about your perspective about those that are wanting to somehow make it easier for what clearly are sexually deviant adults to gain access to kids, especially in schools through these these safe space clubs.
hippie land was over 60% for Bernie Sanders during the Democratic primary. So that kind of gives you a flavor of what you like there. But in San Francisco, I know the voting age is actually 16. So you can vote in local races at the age of 16. But, the whole consent part is tethered. They want to bring down the voting age. You want to bring other things. So they don't want to say that, if you're 18, you're an adult anymore. They want to bring it down. And of course, I think sexual predators love that. They are. I'm sure they're going to move to states where they can have sex with minors, and that's very concerning to me. And in Virginia, I just don't think we're going to stand for that in this state. So thank God for that. We're going to fight to make sure that we're not pushing down the age of consent, and we're not going to bow down to lowering the voting age to the 16 either, because I think 16 is just too young. Spend more time being a teenager and then vote when you're 18. I know the voting age used to be 21. I do think 21 was too high. I'm glad they moved it to 18, but we should keep it where it's at right now.
There you go. What do you see happening if the Democrats gain control of the Virginia Senate? And this is probably going to hold true for all other states. So talk to the voters that are listening to you. Talk to citizens now that need to understand how crucial it is to get out and vote and get pastors and get members from the congregation, get them active, getting out to the polls, because you can win this. Each conservative candidate can win and stand for the protection of women and children if they get out and vote, because these issues, when you break them down as you are doing, people begin to see that there are clear lines of not just right and wrong, but protection versus what's going to set women and children up for potential exploitation and harm.
In 21, we were able to flip the House of Delegates. Senate is under Democrat control, and Louise Lucas, she brags about how she throws the bills that Todd Gilbert presents, who's the Speaker of the House, in the trash, and things that Governor Youngkin presents, in the garbage. So we have not been able to pass much on the conservative agenda, unfortunately, because the Senate has been blocking this. I mean, we have 45 days of early voting. I mean, it's too long, and we can't get enough poll watchers for on the Democrat and the Republican side to cover polls for 45 days. So I would rein it in, and ideally I would like to see same day voting or 1 week of voting, but we got to change the status quo. But the Democrats have been blocking any changes on early voting that were imposed in 2020. Another thing is, monument protection. We saw that the General Lee statue was melted down against House Bill 1537, which only permits the relocation and transfer monuments to museums, outfields, and other places. But they melted it down, and I think it's tragic. And I would revisit that law, add more teeth, and I would like to get rid of localities' ability to remove historical monuments, because it's part of the woke agenda. They want to remove history. In the Seville Weekly, they said that the melting down of the Lee statue was not removing history. And that's not true. That is absolutely not true. When you take down historical art, you are removing history. And they just refuse to call it for what it is. There's pro-Second Amendment bills that failed the Senate. We're never going to get constitutional carry, which I support, until we flip the Senate. I want to get rid of gun-free zones. I want to put school resource officers in every public school in the Commonwealth of Virginia, because the defund the police movement wants to get rid of armed school resource officers. And I want to put them in there so that way our kids have an extra layer of protection from mass shooters that would want to take their lives. So that's something that we must get past once we flip the Senate.
I'm adding another screen shot here. This is my endorsement of you on behalf of myself and Unmasking the Trans Movement. We have endorsed you. I know Ken McClinton of TECN.TV endorsed you. On this screenshot, on my endorsement, we go through the key bullet point lists that, as far as protection, that if you get into the Senate, let me have you speak to these. I'm just going to run by them one by one. What will you do as far as protecting our kids from the grooming in schools and in libraries?
Sir, cool. Education authority to remove books. It's great that we have parents challenging them in every county in Virginia. You have to have dedicated parents who are willing to do these challenges. And I know in Amherst County, there was one parent said, I had to challenge 50 books. I mean, that's a lot of time for one parent. So instead of having it down at the local level, I want to bring it up to the state level and have the Virginia Department of Education have the authority to remove books that will not comport with state law. And we'll make it very clear if there's images of sex, if it's not a science book where you're learning human anatomy and it's talking about sex in a graphic way, we're not going to permit it. You can learn about it in anatomy, you can learn about it in biology, but that's it. We don't want to permit it anywhere else.
There we go. Excellent. Okay, the second bullet point I have on this graphic is you will protect the private spaces of women and girls. You spoke to that. Anything else you want to add to that? We're talking bathrooms, changing rooms, really single space, girls' rooms, boys' rooms, men's rooms, women's rooms. The deviant men that are accessing porn, who then become deviant and want access, including with their cell phone cameras. So the girls are then, and women, you mentioned Riley Gaines and that entire team, a number of them were traumatized. This guy's in there and he get an erection and, they're supposed to concentrate on their safety and the race that's coming up. So how do you feel about protecting the private spaces of girls and women?
Should be criminal to either go into female space. And women, who feel threatened should be able to call the police, and those folks should be arrested, and we'll shut it down. That's what needs it. And Virginia Women Take Action has endorsed me because I support protecting female spaces and women's spaces, and is certainly one of my issues in this campaign.
How about women's sports?
Support protecting women's sports 100%. Actually, I had a rally to protect women's sports last month with a Colgate skater who she actually testified along with Riley Gaines and many other athletes in defense of women's sports in the General Assembly earlier this year. So yes, I will defend it tooth and nail. I think that there should be men's sports, there should be women's sports, and that's it. And we shouldn't be allowing men in women's sports, period.
That's right. Good. How about parental rights?
In 2015, parental rights are fundamental, and we have deviated far from it. Parents don't get consent to many things. With Michelle Blair, her granddaughter was told that she could be a boy. She changed her name to Draco, and she was not notified. And what happened was that Sage ended up being sexually assaulted not by just one boy, but by 5 boys. And if the grandparents had known what was going on in the schools, they could have stopped it. They said, no, we're not going to allow granddaughter to have a hall pass to the boys' bathroom, and they could have prevented that sexual assault. So, yes, I believe parental rights fundamental in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And thankfully, Michelle Blair, who's the grandmother of Sage, filed a federal lawsuit saying her parental rights were violated out in the Lynchburg Federal District Court. And I'm going to fight for parents' rights and say that the schools, school boards, teachers, principals cannot keep things like the gender ideology of their child secret. They can't keep the showing of pornographic books to kids in schools a secret. I mean, there's a lot of things like teaching CRT. They can't keep that a secret. You know, if they're teaching in the classroom, parents should know what's going on. If they don't like it, they should be able to pull them out and put them in a different classroom. And I believe in school choice, which means that you could take a voucher and put your child in a private school if you're not happy with the public school that they're in, just like what Florida and other states do. So yes, parents' rights will certainly matter with the Senator Hamilton.
There we go. And I'm going to bring up that graphic. I encourage people, as a matter of fact, I'll get my picture out of the way if I know how to do that. Just if they want to take a screenshot of that, because these are points that people should ask their potential representative how they plan to vote on these things. And your name is prominently displayed on the bottom of that, Philip Hamilton for Virginia State Senate, seat 11th. You just spoke to, and so in 2 minutes remaining, speak to us again about what are you planning on doing to put a stop to those doctors and those medical facilities that are eager to make money off and profit off slicing the sex organs off of kids.
They're under the age of 18. They're young to consent to such an invasive and sterilizing procedure, period. And, I'm going to go after Planned Parenthood too. Planned Parenthood, there hasn't been an inspection of their facilities since 2018, from what I've been told. Planned Parenthood's been pushing these hormone therapies, these puberty blockers for kids, and they even give them at the first or even the second appointment. And I know that there's a documentary called No Way Back, The Reality of Gender Affirming Care, that talks about detransitioners, which are kids that transition and then they transition back to their original gender. We got to go back for Planned Parenthood, and these medical institutions are pushing this agenda, and to hold them accountable. I think if we have civil penalties, it's not going to be enough, because they'll, just kind of like in 2020, how people who are writing for Antifa and Black Lives Matter, they had these bail funds. They'll do a similar thing. They'll try to bail these doctors and nurses and others out of jail. And the thing is, I think the civil offense is not enough. We got to go to the criminal route with these things.
There you go. Philip Hamilton, you are running for the Virginia State Senate, the 11th District. I pray that the voters get out and make that happen. Thank you for accommodating my tech issues here. Thank you for being with us, and we will watch with eager anticipation your election. And thank you again for being with us on this special edition of Unmasking the Trans Movement. Yes.
Lyman tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. in Houston County, Livingston Cafe, and we're having an election night party at the Calpeter Clubhouse. And there's going to be a debate between the chair of the Democratic Party of Virginia and Republican Party of Virginia, Rich Anderson, on election night, and they're going to be giving step-by-step analysis of all their returns for the 100 delegate candidates and for the 40 seats open for the Virginia Senate candidates. So I appreciate you having me on this evening, and let's go win.
We'll do it again. Tell them, where are you going to be tomorrow and what time?
I will be. And it's going to be 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we will look forward to watching you win. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Well, folks, it's time. You've got to get out and vote, regardless of whatever state you are in, and especially if you're in Virginia and the 11th district. Let's help get that good man in to protect women and children. And Brad, thank you as always. Thank you. You're way up in Canada, so thank you for making the time. And we will continue to try to spread the word. And this has been another compelling episode.
Absolutely. Thank you both for being here today. This is an excellent show. It's going to hopefully get more Virginians and other Americans around the country to stand up. You know, what you've just done is provide some guidance to these parents and grandparents to get involved. And I think that that information is going to be very, very valuable going forward. So thank you very much for being here today. John, as always, it's a pleasure. I look forward to our next episode coming up right here on Unmasking the Trans Movement. You can find all of our episodes on BitChute. You can also log into our website at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. You can sign up to become a member, get some detailed information that'll help you along your path with getting active and keeping up this fight against this evil ideology. I'm Brad Wilder. Thanks for being here today. We'll see you next time.